Welcome to the unknown, where the veil between worlds grows thin and the echoes of the strange and unexplained call out from the shadows. You've just tuned into the very first episode of Static Echoes, your gateway to the supernatural, the bizarre, and the mysterious. I'm your host, Gary Anderson, and each week we'll explore the chilling tales of haunted places, cryptid encounters, UFO sightings, and conspiracies that may be closer to the truth than we're led to believe. Expect eyewitness accounts, deep dives with special guests, and field reports from the front lines of the unexplained. So turn down the lights, keep your mind open, and prepare to hear what others fear to speak aloud. This is Static Echoes. Hello everybody and welcome to the premiere episode of Static Echoes, a brand new podcast where we're going to dive deep into the paranormal and all things strange, mysterious and left of center. As this is the first episode, I thought we would start off with a big bang and have a special guest on who is none other than Ray Doherty. Ray is a renowned Yowie researcher and truth seeker who has spent decades chasing the strange and the spooky. Yes, he has done everything from Yowie research to UFO investigation and a little bit into demonology and other things, just to name a few. So I thought, what better way to start the show off with a little bit of everything. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Ray. Ray Doherty, welcome to the show. How are things going with you, my friend?
Yeah, very good, young Gary. Thank you for having me back on, and for particularly for your brand new podcast, your audio version. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, you are number one, and this is the premiere episode, so what better way to start off with now? I know we've been talking in the background and everything. You've got some very exciting things happening at the moment. Do you want to jump straight into that?
Oh, well, yes, basically, look, with the way at the moment my life is, my field work is pretty heavily limited. It's not any health things. Previously that was issues, but no, I look after a relative full-time as well as work full-time. And at the moment, unfortunately, all I've had time to do is to work on projects, and I've got 3 of them on the go at the moment. I've got a new fiction book that I'm writing, as we've spoken about on other podcasts. When I was unfortunately unwell the last couple of years, I was pretty limited to home, and I wrote a book called Jesus Can't Drive. And now I'm working on another one, which hopefully will be out hopefully by the end of the year. But I'm also working on 2 Yowie books, one Yowie book and one reference book, which will be called the Encyclopedia of Australian Folklore. I'm working with researcher Tim Shipstone on that, who is working, doing a lot of the research to help me out while I work on the primary Yowie book.
Wow, I would love to hear more about the folklore, because Australia is actually pretty rich with it when you look into it, but not many people know about a lot of it.
No, they don't, and that includes us. So that's why we're researching it. The thing is that, if we look at other parts of the world, there are folklores almost geographically broken down by suburb. And, whilst we want to focus a lot on national things, when does folklore become urban legend or urban myth? So, and because we've only got a limited population in this country, we don't tend to make a huge deal out of it. It's sort of a thing that only locals know. So, it's going to be a work in progress. That one is we're hoping for that one to probably be middle to the end of next year. But the other primary Yowie book, I'm hoping for this time next year at the latest.
You've already sold 2 copies. I'll have a copy of each of those.
Well, that's a start. That's a great start. Thank you, Gary. I'll hold you to that. Did I mention they're going to be $25,000 each?
Hey, you forgot that bit, unfortunately. I've just put another mortgage on my house, I think.
Got to make the money back somehow. Look, I don't know what prices they will be, but they'll be relatively reasonably priced, as well as the ebook version. So But that's what's in the works at the moment. And also, it's been unusually cold here in Queensland, believe it or not. It's starting to warm up a bit now, but we'll be starting to hopefully, as time eases a little bit over the next month or so, hopefully we'll be able to have some time to get into the field, and Tim and I can hit the field again. We've got a few places we want to check out, and as I indicated to you when we spoke last time, I've been investing in new technology, including a new drone, which has been great. I got a new drone, thanks to another researcher who was able to upgrade to a much better one. But I've still got a 5K drone that has a range of 8 kilometers, so that's pretty good.
That's better than mine. Mine's got, I think, a 4K kilometer range on it, but the battery won't let it go that far. Or it will let it go that far, but it won't make it all the way back.
Well, we've got some places we want to check out with drones up in, around southeast Queensland, and particularly the Western Corridor is very, very hilly and is very steep and very a lot of terrain that's inaccessible. So, we're going to be using the drone to fly over that and have a look down in 4K and see what we can see, really, because flying drones in rainforests or in just general old growth forest is not advised, and I certainly don't want to damage a $5,000 drone. So so we'll be using it to check out some hard to get at places, that's for sure.
Oh, it's definitely good to get a lay of the land and work out where you want to be setting yourself up, because it's a big old bush out there, and knowing exactly where you want to be setting up is hard unless you've got an eye in the sky.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we want to go out there and just cover some area that we can't get to, and obviously what the drone allows for is to cover that area quickly. So we'll be using that in the right time when it comes along, when the opportunity presents itself. But as I said, we're just working on the written works at the moment. And in relation to the Yowie book that I'm writing, how I'm writing this, I haven't named it yet, so that's why I haven't mentioned it by name. Working up a couple of options. This book is going to be based around one of the reasons, and I've been at this for over 20 years now, and a lot of people have always said to me, why haven't you done a book before this on the Yowies? And the solution is pretty simple as to why. I didn't know how I wanted to tell the story. I didn't know how I wanted to tell or how I wanted to write it. And it troubled me for a long time. See, I don't want to do a book of other people's experiences, not for my own book. I've been talking with other researchers, as I indicated last year, about working with them and creating a book of their researched experience and their witness reports up in other parts of Australia, but that hasn't come to fruition just yet. And what I'm working on is trying to tell it, I guess. I'm not necessarily a trained investigator per se. I'm not a scientist, even though I've studied, primatology and paleoanthropology, but I'm not a scientist. But I wanted to tell the book from an editorial perspective, and I thought the best way to be able to tell the book is from when I started and what I have found along the way, what I think is evidence, what some of this evidence means, and using comparisons in anthropology with ancient peoples and indigenous peoples from Australia and around the world, and trying to see if there's any correlations between the evidence I find and how they used to live, hundreds or thousands of years ago. And then trying to find any relative, trying to connect the dots in a way. And also including that and mixing in with that, actual experiments that we've conducted here and things that we've learnt what they mean, what we believe, what they've learnt what they mean. But, in terms of Yowie research, we're really only scratching the surface.
Yeah, it's not as well known or as big a thing as the old Bigfoot investigators are in America. I mean, it's almost like a cult following going over there and going out on a Bigfoot hunt.
I don't forget they've got 340 million people and we only got 28. So,
yeah, that's what I mean. But I mean, to give you an idea, we went out on a Yowie research with the West Australian Paranormal Researchers just recently, and I didn't actually think we would pick anything up. And we did get what sounded like a couple of vocalizations, and it was enough to set local dogs off. So that's enough for us to really, get you all excited about going back and giving it another go.
Well, let me ask you a question. And this is a question I'm posing in my book. How many types of Yowies do you think there are in Australia?
This is a conversation we've had many, many times, and I don't know. I mean, when we go out looking for something, we're looking for something that is not the normal, but to actually put a number on how many different types, I've heard there are large, the large sort of Bigfoot type ones, and then you got the smaller, more, I don't know if you say rounded, but definitely a smaller species of them as well, and there could possibly be many in between.
At least, and I mean at least 5 different types. At
Wow.
least
Now,
5.
when you say different types, what differentiates them?
Well, this is what we talk about in the book, and when the book comes out in next year. I talk about, and I start about how I first believed that these things were just apes, an undiscovered new classification of ape that was living undiscovered in Australia. And I pursued that line of scientific investigation as best I could for, at least 12 years until we got the tree sitter photo, which showed a very hominid face as opposed to ape. Even the pictures I got in the past, and even the sightings, the physical sightings I had, indicated that they looked like an ape. They lived like an ape. They had vocalizations like an ape. They lots of things were about an ape, but it wasn't. But I'd never seen a clear, and I mean close and clear face shot. And when I started to get a few, they still looked pretty apey, pretty like a great ape. And it wasn't until we got the tree sitter, which clearly doesn't look ape. It looks more Neanderthalish. It looks more hominid. It looks more human.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the types of Yowies, we're talking about and the different types of Yowies. I'm saying we're talking about at least 5, maybe 7, possibly even 8 or 9 different types of relic hominids that's still alive in Australia. Now, we also know that a couple of external bodies have done studies in Australia insofar as that, as to how much of Australia has been discovered or undiscovered, shall we say.
Yeah.
And the answer comes back in a report in 2008 by the Pew Environment Group, as well as the Nature Conservancy, which is pretty big over in WA. At least 40% of Australia hasn't been discovered or touched. Now, when I say these different types, we're talking about from all different parts of the country. Yeah. We're talking about the big ones that you see in Queensland, New South Wales. We see the small ones that you're seeing in Queensland, New South Wales. We're also seeing the big and small up in North Queensland. But in North Queensland, we're also seeing a different one. There's a couple of reports of basically something that looked like an orangutan, an orange orangutan that walked like a man, like a human male, or a human, shall we say. Yeah. So then we go over to Northern Territory and we go over to East Jabiru, and I've over the years been lucky enough to speak to quite a number of elders about it. And then they will say there are the tall, super tall, skinny ones that they have seen with their own eyes. And then there are the little pygmy type ones. And then there are even smaller ones that they have seen. And the lady I spoke to, who was an elder, as well as married to a fairly prominent person in that region of the country, relayed to me several stories of her and her brother. Actually, I mean, she was when I met her, she was well into her late 70s, early 80s. So we're talking back into the 40s and maybe even 50s when her and her brother were camping, and seeing ones that are no more than maybe even a couple of feet tall. She recounts a story to me that she was camping with her brother and her uncle out in this particular area of the Northern Territory, and one night she woke up and she heard what was like little. I'm just trying to find the phrase. Like little things hitting the outside of the tent.
Yeah.
So, for example, just like little, almost like raindrops, but not rain, when you could feel it hitting. And she figured out there was actually little tiny rocks, little tiny pebbles. And her brother had woken her up with this. And they said, let's go have a look. And we're talking, she's only 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old when this happens. And the uncle's asleep. So they get out with the torch and they shine it around, and they shine it over one particular range of bushes that were pretty close to the tent, and they see at least about 30 pairs of eyes shine
Oh, wow.
looking at them. That's no more than about 2 feet off the ground. So we had those reports of those really tiny ones from up that way, as well as the big ones, the Junjati sized ones, the even bigger ones. In Northern Territory, there could be at 3 or 4 different types. But even over in WA, there's been the reports of not necessarily the huge ones, but I've heard stories of much smaller ones. I've heard the Junjati ones, but then I heard it from up north, up around, northwest Cape area, up around on the coastal regions. We've got another one that looks very human-like, that almost cavemanish, that's quite small, maybe about 4 foot tall. And then, of course, I've heard stories from, in the desert up there as well, that people out there working, whatever they may be doing, coming across yet another type. So, I mean, already we've spoken about 7 or 8 different types. And so with the space that we have, with 40% undiscovered, I mean, we have no idea as to actually what is living in that 40% and what is surviving. And we have no idea in the vastness of Australia, particularly through Northern Territory and, far western Queensland, far western New South Wales as well, even though it's hot and fairly inhospitable, and particularly up in North Queensland and other said parts of the territory. We have no idea what's out there. We really have absolutely zero idea. So that's one of the things we look at in the book, and that's one of the things we talk about as well.
It sounds really interesting. Really interesting. I mean, I'm going back to when we did our investigation, and like I said, I think there was 2 vocalizations that I've picked up from the footage. And what's interesting is when I went through the thermal imaging, I actually picked up a hotspot that was peering from behind a tree, and it's very indistinct, and I wouldn't 100% turn around and say that's what it is, a Yowie, but it was definitely something there, and there was nobody in that part of the where we were anyway. And I haven't got a chance yet to go back and find that specific tree so we can work out a height. I don't know if it was a particularly tall one because it was going up a hill a little bit, but there was something definitely black, which is we were running black hot on the thermal imager, so it's like what the police helicopters use. Yeah, there was definitely something hanging around, and I can't guarantee it was anything of any note, but it was definitely something unusual. And it just makes me wonder what, with you going into this, at least 4 or 5 different species, what we're actually looking at.
At least. And what we're looking at, I think potentially, at least on a surface level, that we're looking at there is potentially, at least 5, if not 8 different types of relic hominids still somehow surviving into the 21st century in Australia. Do we have any proof? No, not really. Can we get proof? Some we can, yes. But the problem is that we don't have, even though we have the facilities, we have a lack of will from some of those facilities to really work with us on particularly any kind of DNA analysis. So we know how to catch, shall we say, if that's the right word, their DNA. And we use a primatology technique, which is just a feeding station. We figured out, at least around in southeast Queensland, what foods they like. We have recovered, and I go into detail in this in the book. We've covered dental casts. We've got dental impressions. We've got an expert dental doctor assessment of what those teeth are. We've got quite a number of ways in which we can get the DNA. So, for example, from the feeding station, whether we give them sweet corn or mangoes, which is what they really like, but they don't like green mangoes, obviously. They like the ones that are just past ripe because you have the much higher sugar content in it. And we know that, and we learnt that because of a lot of the fruit farms that live in the adjoining area, that's what is taken from them at regular intervals. And the same is around through lots of places that is grown, that where fruit is taken, the just past ripe stuff is taken because that sugar ferments and almost like an alcohol in some ways. And they really like it. They'll walk through hot coals for it. So we can and we have also learnt how they eat. Like they eat like a lot of great apes. Sometimes great apes, when they're eating, particularly if there's a shortage of food or a particular delicacy, sometimes they'll just run straight in the middle of where everyone's feeding and grab themselves a handful and then run away and skulk away somewhere and just, down it as quickly as possible. They don't usually eat where they find stuff, particularly at feeding stations. So we have found clusters of mango seeds, all within 50 meters of the feeding station, and usually always in direct line of sight as well. So we can recover DNA from the mango seeds. We can recover DNA from the corn cobs. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But the other way is things like on nearby water supplies, you can do shotgun DNA tests and test the water for all the different species that may appear, which, these are all credible scientific testing methods. But unfortunately, a lot of the universities just still want to put this in the realm of fantasy.
Pseudosciences and stuff, yeah.
Well, fantasy and pseudoscience and, they just want to, a lot of them just want to laugh at it. However, the only thing that does overcome that with certain universities is actually cold hard cash. So if we had the money to actually fund a genetic study such as this, like what the Royal Copenhagen Institute did into Indigenous Australians a few years ago, then I'm sure we could get to the answer pretty quickly. But then again, we look at what vested interests are there from the discovery of these creatures, and I think there's some significant vested interests from mining, from timber, from logging, from certain state governments. I think there's a great vested interest in just leaving these things in the realm of fantasy.
Yeah, and like what you were just saying there about, obviously DNA sampling is a bona fide scientific tool, but they're not wanting to accept the findings of these scientific investigations that they're doing. So they're identifying these key markers in the DNA, but they're still not prepared to put their money where their mouth is and just go out there and say what it is.
As I said, we can get the DNA. We just need suitably qualified institutions who can actually test it for us.
Yeah.
Then we're going to talk, also in the book coming up, I talk about a number of the really solid photographic evidence that we have, including the Benfield photo from Tamworth, which I know you've seen, which is just a phenomenal photo. I mean, this is the clearest photo of a Yowie ever taken. And I guess that's the mission now, is to try and go back into the field. I got to a point where I thought I'd learned as much as I could without investing more serious time and effort, which I have already invested some serious time and effort into it. But no, I think we've got to go back and take what we've learned and try to shortcut the whole investigation process, and actually just try to find different ways to study them and try to find different ways to try and get them engaged with you.
Well, I mean, a lot of that comes to getting out there as well, which leads me on to actually something else. And the reason you originally got out there was you were actually looking for something completely different, and you ended up with this little bit of a crossworld splitting into two different genres of paranormal, I guess. So
yeah,
you were actually out looking for UFOs, weren't you, when it all started for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, my interest in space goes back to when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old. In fact, my grandfather, in Brisbane in the 70s, my grandfather used to live with us. And, when we used to have these series of rolling strikes with the power companies. So there was a few nights there for a certain period of time before he died. This is in the mid-70s, where we'd have no power, and you could look up, and we're in the inner city, but you could look up and see stars and everything everywhere. And I mean, the whole city lights, everything was shut down except the hospitals. And, my grandfather once said to me, he said, look, son, he said, if you look up in space long enough and hard enough, eventually you'll see something you can't explain. So that sort of started my interest, not necessarily in UFOs, because I had no concept of what UFOs were when I was 7 or 8 years of age. But it got my interest going in astrophotography. And by the time I was sort of 17, 18, I had a pretty nice telescope with the old film camera. And I would go out. Once I got my license, I would go out and take a lot of lot of deep space photos, and particularly of the planets and a few nebulas. And as technology evolved that way, and then we had, shall we say, a few strange experience, what we would call UFO or UAP experiences in my late teens and early 20s, which led me to work with a group of guys from probably around about the age of 22 up until I was about 29, 7-8 years. And we would go out basically every moment we had, 2 or 3 or 4 nights a week. We would go out to these places. And one of the particular places we used to go to was a place called Mount Walker out in a suburb called Rosewood, west of Ipswich. Now, this sits directly behind the, not close behind, but behind Amberley Air Force Base. And, man, we used to see between there and Wivenhoe Dam, we used to see some stuff. It was just absolutely incredible. But where the Yowies come into it, one particular night, it was a year almost to the week before I had my main big Yowie encounter, which really kind of shook my world a fair bit. But we had the telescopes out, and there was it's a farming area, so there's a lot of cattle. And then the cattle and the sheep, they were sharing this large paddock, and we were looking towards Mount Walker to the right of the cemetery there. And we saw these very strange coloured eyes appear. So we got, it was me, there was me, my friend Steve, and his son Stevie, who was only 14 at the time. And I think Michael, the friend Michael was with us. Anyway, we were looking at these lights, and we also had, part of our UFO hunting gear back then in 1994, or 93, 94, I think it was. We had about a 3-4 million candle power handheld spotlight. So that was pretty bright. So we shined the light over towards it, and we saw these eyes. When the head moved one way, they were yellow. Another head, they moved another way, they went green. And then when they looked straight ahead, they became red, reflecting the light. And then we're watching this thing. So Stevie's shining the torch. I'm looking at it through binoculars. And so Steve, his father's looking at binoculars. And then suddenly, so we could see that these eyes were hiding behind like a you know how you get those waves in the road, like at the old drive-ins, you have those humps, right? Yep. So the grass, the ground, the farm ground went a bit like that, but uphill, right? So these eyes were hiding behind one of these humps. And we thought, so Stevie hit it with the handheld spotty. And this thing turned red, and then it suddenly raised up about 7-8 feet off the ground. And then we couldn't really see, believe it or not, with the spotty much. We saw what looked like a 7 or 8 foot hairy person covered in hair starting to walk towards us.
Yeah, that's not the direction you want to see something like that coming.
We grabbed everything. We threw it. This is how my great telescope broke, by the way, too. We threw everything in the boot. We didn't bother putting it away. We just threw it in the boot of my car. And we just jumped in and we just took off. We didn't hang around. Oh, actually, sorry. Before that, I should say I left out a very important part of the story. Some writer I am. Before we had that sighting, there was a smell. We just had this wind, this waft of wind come up, and the smell. And it smelled like something was dead. And we looked at each other and said, "What the hell is that? Is there a cow died in one of these paddocks?" And then we heard this hellish scream. It sounded like halfway between a scream and a roar, like someone was crying out. But it was so unusual. We had no idea what it was. And then we looked at each other because we'd heard about Yowies and we spent a lot of time in the bush, but we'd never had any encounter before. And I looked at Steve and I said, "Is that Yowie?" And he goes, "I don't know." And then little Stevie spotted the eyes, and then we saw the eyes, and then it started moving towards us, walking towards us. So then we just, as I said, we loaded everything. We just literally threw it in the back of the car and took off. And we got probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 Ks down the road. And when we calmed down, and we thought, okay, let's go back for a look. And we went back with the spotlight out of the car. We didn't get out of the car, and the car didn't didn't go below 10 kilometers an hour. But we
would.
hit it with the spot. We hit everything with the spotlight, even in that area, and we couldn't find anything. We couldn't hear anything, and we just said, "No, let's go home." And that's when, of course, when I realized my telescope was broken when I got home. And but that was the very first encounter. But out there, we had some significant UFO encounters, and I was not alone. And there was more than there was at least 4 of us on each occasion. And this, we're talking the early mid-90s, right? We're not talking about now in 2025 when Brisbane is becoming such a massively built-up city. Back then, the population of Brisbane was barely 1 million. Now, it's nearly 3. This whole area, every spare block of land and dirt at the moment is just being turned into housing development. I know out there it's still farms, but it's nowhere near as remote as it used to be. Because out there back then, there was no one out there other than people who lived there. But you would never, ever see, or rarely ever see, a car on that road any night of the week. And it was such a great spot. The things that we saw out there were just, honestly, it sounds like the X-Files, some of them. And but particularly there's one encounter because it was a straight stretch of road. It was almost like very close encounter is, and I know I make it sound flippant, but I get excited talking about it. And
don't we all?
And this particular road, which was Mount Walker Rosewood Road, and I can't remember what it turns into further down, but it's straight. It goes around a bend at the mount where the cemetery is, and then it's straight. 2-4 kilometers long, maybe 5, if not longer. I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
I never measured it, and it would have been about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning, and that was the other thing we found. We found out the UFO sightings were far more intensive back then in winter, and on like Sunday nights especially because in winter and on a Sunday night when people have got to go to work the next morning, there's not many of them out there, not many people around, and these things tend to move around, but. This one particular occasion, we saw this really bright light coming towards us. As I said, it was a straight road, and we could see it coming from ages away. And we were watching it. We thought, okay, it's a car. We'll just keep watching it, and when it gets close, we'll move off because we used to stand in the middle of the road, and we just had far more room to work with there, and usually someone was keeping an eye out, but. We were watching it, and it kept coming closer and closer and closer, and then we realized it wasn't really like even though it was so super bright, it wasn't really like a truck light or a car light. It was just this beam of light. And then we're watching it, and it's getting closer. It's maybe about, I don't know, maybe about half a kilometer away from us. And then without warning, and suddenly it just shoots straight up in the sky.
Okay, that's not a car then.
No, it's definitely not a car. And we're just watching it, and it just literally shot straight up. It just was coming along the road, and then suddenly, in an instant, it went just straight up. Not like a plane taking off or anything like that, just came on. It was coming, and then suddenly, like 90-degree angle, straight up in the sky, and it just zoomed off about as fast with the speed of a shooting star coming down.
Wow.
But that's how fast it went up, and then we lost it. It was gone.
So do you think that might have been an experience with the Min lights or something else?
I've heard of Min lights moving around, but we have no idea. The guy, as I said, in all of these experiences we had out there, we weren't alone. There was at least 3 or 4 of us, and we were at a total loss because back then, personal video recorders cost a screaming fortune, so we couldn't afford any of them. And, what are you going to get from a still camera? But they were all connected to the telescope. So this thing so we just had to put it down as we thought was a really, really cool experience. But that was as an example of some of the stuff that we would see out there. One time over at Wivenhoe, a year later, the following winter, we saw what looked like an orb flying around over the dam surface, moving super quick. So quick that the light was streaky, and it was just moving around from one side to the other, to the other, to the other, to one side, up and down, in hills, in and around some of the hills, inside some of the coves. It was like it was looking for something, but it was just almost like a pinball, if that makes any sense.
How big would you say this light was?
I know it was purple. I can tell you that. We saw it. It was purple. It was the most amazing tone of purple I'd ever seen, with a slightly lighter but glowing center. I would have to say probably would have been the size of, say, something like a Toyota Yaris, like a little old Yaris.
Yeah.
Something maybe around about, I don't know, 7-8 feet long. I mean, I saw something the other night which was very similar to that, except it was green. And this was in the city of Brisbane. I saw it the other night. I was driving along on Friday night. About 1:30 in the morning, I just came off the highway and I was heading down South Pine Road towards Eaton's Hill, and I just saw this green thing about the size of a car. So it was too small for a plane and way too low and going too quick. Oh, actually, no, it'd probably go about the same speed as what a light aircraft would, but it was way too low. No nav lights, no headlights, nothing. It was just this emerald green light. And it would have been in like the size of a very small car. And it was maybe only a few hundred feet above. And I saw it come from the west. It came from I'm facing west. So it came from the sort of southwest, and then it turned north for about maybe a kilometer, and then it just turned left to go west again, and then it just vanished and I'll tell you, over the Brendale Industrial Estate. But I wasn't the same. Only went and disappeared over a suburb called Warner. I actually mentioned it in a UFO group. There's a Brisbane UFO group on Facebook. I actually mentioned it, and someone said at the same time, and the same night, I saw the same thing over Cashmere, which is a suburb next to Warner, which was probably 5 k's away from me.
That is almost identical to something that happened to us. We were actually doing a paranormal investigation out at the Alkimos shipwreck, which is up near Mindarie, north of Perth. And we were down on the beach, and we were sort of split up over several spots, because obviously it's hard to get out to the wreck itself, because about 99% of the ship's underwater now. But there's still been a lot of reports of orbs and things like that, and strange things happening around the wreck. Now, we were recording some EVP work at the time, trying to see if we could pick anything up, when we noticed something heading from Perth. Now, Perth was south of us at the time, and this was an emerald green orb, and it was flying what appeared to be straight from the city out west in a westerly direction out over the ocean, before it just went whoosh and just disappeared at like super fast speed. It just accelerated so fast it couldn't have been anything man-made. And when you were talking about that, it just reminded me very much of that same thing. Now, obviously, because we were recording EVP, we didn't actually have our cameras with us. They were all back up where we had all the gear set up. So it was so quick that even if we'd wanted to get a camera up and running, by the time the camera was up and running, this thing would have been gone.
But look, what I just can't believe at the moment is by how many UAP sightings there are. That we now, not necessarily UFO, but UAP, which is probably a better name for them, because they are aerial phenomenon, because we don't know if they're, they are an unidentified flying object, but they're also an identified aerial phenomenon as well. And we don't know who owns them. We don't know who runs them. We assume that they're either alien or military. If they're military, why? I just struggle to wrap my head around the idea that if they're actual military, that why would anyone? They wouldn't want you to see it. I'm just convinced of that, unless it's part of a bigger plan. But why, over an industrial area in north of Brisbane at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, Saturday night?
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense for that to be a thing. But oddly enough, there seems to have been a number of UAP sightings, but rather than being limited, I think maybe it depends where you go as well. I got the impression, I've been reading everything that's been going on and everything that's been happening. It just gets the impression that, this is escalating. This is getting bigger.
Yeah.
Whatever this is. And it's just getting more and more intense and more involved. Eventually, how things work is when they start to escalate and they start to get more intense, then, the bottom line is that eventually it comes to a head. When, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how. I have no idea. And in what way? No clue either. It's just all. Yeah, anyone who says they know, no one can know. It's just purely speculation at this point.
No. But it's funny talking about this because I had a conversation a few days ago with Ben Hansen, and you might know him from a lot of TV shows. He's big. He's an ex-FBI agent, and he's big on the UAP at the moment. And he said there's a lot of stuff going on over in America in that UAP space. And he said he didn't want to go into a lot of it because there's a lot of stuff coming up. And I did mention to him about the drones, a lot of the drone footage, because there was a lot of drone sightings over the US and around the world over the last year or so, and he said it seems to have died off over there. And the reason that conversation came about is because we saw two of them. My wife and I saw two of them, basically from our front driveway last week, and it was very strange because we never see anything like that here. But that leads me to my next question. We had a conversation. We have conversations quite a bit, and remember that conversation that we had about connections over in Utah and about using certain pieces of equipment over here and trying to capture them. Well, I have got said piece of equipment now, which is a spectrum analyzer, and we will be going back out there. But one of the questions I wanted to put to you is, have you ever noticed that in certain areas the UFO or the lights in the sky seem to be very focused on a specific point in the sky? Have you ever noticed that?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, when we do our Skywatch evenings and things like that, we've noticed that there's a specific point in the southwest sky where there is a lot of activity that happens. Now, we've discounted drones. We have discounted planes or helicopters or anything man-made that we would know of, and we have discounted satellites because satellites don't change direction and they don't appear and disappear in a very short space. They tend to go all the way across the sky.
No, and there's plenty of websites that you can use. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
No, sorry, we're just having a bit of a crossover because of my poor internet connection. But bloody forgot what I was going to say now. No, I'm sorry. It's gone from my head totally now because I'm just worried about this internet connection. But if you're talking about focused on particular, like you mean like a certain height, a certain altitude, or a certain direction?
A specific point in the sky. Now, this is going on what we've been investigating while we've been checking out this this location where we've been doing a few Skywatch nights, and we've picked up quite a lot of evidence and sightings from this spot. But there is one particular point in the sky where these things will appear and then disappear, and it's almost, to me, if you were to look at a map of Australia and you were looking at the flight plans, everything congregates around an airport. You know what I mean? That's where it's at its densest. There's a particular point in the sky where it's very dense with all of this strange activity, which led me to that show, the Skinwalker Ranch TV show.
Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
Yes, our friend Brandon Fugel, who I've asked a few questions of on X, and who you've been wanting to get on your show. My questions were more practical and scientific, because if you haven't watched the first 5 seasons of Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, go out and watch them. Find them wherever you get them from. Definitely. I don't know where you get them from, but watch them, particularly the last season and a half, especially. And then to paraphrase, and it's all out there in the public domain, so I'm not blowing any spoilers here, but so what they've identified is obviously an anomaly on the ranch that they believe that, from electromagnetic readouts and LiDAR images shows like some what you would call the shape of, at least, of what could potentially be a wormhole. It fits that classic shape that's been theorized by Einstein. But also what they've also found now in the new season, and I'm only 2 episodes into the new season, that they've also found that there's above that cone-shaped object that extends quite a few hundred feet up, at a 2,000-foot mark, they find there's like some sort of invisible dome over it that they've been able to measure on LiDAR.
Wow.
So there's a cone and then there's a dome on top of it. So, maybe it's a force field or some other type of technology we don't know about. But I said to Brandon Fugel on X, I said, if there's these crazy electromagnetic readings that shows that there's this, that's interfering with the GPS and everything, why haven't you done tests like hit it with an EMP or use ultraviolet? Ultraviolet, or go through other parts of the light spectrum that we can't see, that's outside of our range, if whatever devices are available. And why not then try to hit that with an EMP and see what kind of results you get? Because the only thing that I know of, and I'm not a scientist, but I read a lot about electronics and things like that, that can, like, for example, they have a big problem with batteries being killed instantly flat on the ranch. Well, and the lead scientist, Travis Taylor, who oddly enough was the head of the chief scientist for the UAP task force in America.
Correct.
Even he says, look, the only thing that would do it would be a high-powered electromagnetic activity or some sort of microwave radiation, but it would cause the battery to basically blow up. You would see the coronal discharge. You'll see at least some burning marks or anything. There's nothing. So some sort of power that's strong enough to suck the power out of a battery of a device. So maybe an EMP wouldn't work. Maybe a lot of these electronic things would be shut down. I would like to see more use of thermal imagery, see what they can get on thermal. They show a lot using infrared. But also, like, I would like them to see also, maybe they could bring in the guys from Skywatcher. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that project that's happening in the States? I sent you the links on Skywatcher.
Yes.
Those guys, I can't remember exactly what part of the US they're in, but they've built their own technology. And if you haven't looked at, go in on X particularly and Google, not Google, but go on X and look for Skywatcher. I think it's called Skywatcher. I'm pretty sure it is. And they've released 3 videos on their website of UAPs, UFOs, and multiple different types that they've caught. And they explain their techniques. Some are technological techniques, some are not. Some are, what you would call mental or paranormal, I suppose, in some way, abilities. But they go into great detail about the technology they've developed. They've developed their own software. And it's really, really, really amazing stuff. And I would like to see those guys go onto Skinwalker Ranch and see if they can, see if they can use their technology and uncover anything else. But the point about Skinwalker is that what you said about a particular point in the sky. I mean, what the footage on Skinwalker Ranch and the Secrets of Skinwalker, they show you that these things, they show you it's some of the best UFO, UAP footage you'll ever see. Suddenly there's nothing. Suddenly there's something there. It suddenly appears and then it suddenly disappears, appears and disappears. And they capture all that on film. And whether it's cloaking ability or whether they're entering in and out of portals. I mean, on one of the seasons, I think it's season 1 or 2, they see a UAP come along broad daylight and straight into the mountainside of what they call the mesa, which is, what would you call it? An elevated flat top mountain, I suppose. It goes straight in one side and pops out the other. So there's obviously some sort of either, maybe they can change their frequency, allowing them to move through objects. It's not what I think. I think they're probably not even from this dimension, to be honest. Again, it's just all conjecture. But
that's where I was sort of going.
But maybe that's where you're going, is that maybe they're popping out of some sort of wormhole, coming out, having a look, and then going, we'll just go on to the next one, and then vanish off again. I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. None of us knows.
No, to give you an idea, when these things are happening where we are, everybody starts going, oh, it's Starlink. No, it's not Starlink, because we're running the apps that tell you exactly where all the Starlink satellites are and things like that. Now, they generally go all the way across the sky.
And there was other apps for the other satellites as well. That's what I was going to say before. Sorry, go on.
No, there aren't. But as I said, satellites generally go all the way across the sky. They don't stop. You know what I mean? On a clear night, They don't just disappear.
No.
And that's what's interesting. Now, I know in research and stuff like that, there's a thing called Starlink flaring. And so we looked into that as well, and we've been able to discount that as well. So we've genuinely got something that we can't identify. I mean, there could potentially still be a very rational explanation for it, but at this point in time, it's quite exciting to see, because these lights don't act like satellites. They don't move in a straight line. They wiggle, they change directions, and then they just disappear in a very short space.
But what do you think they are, though, realistically? What do you think they are? I've got some ideas. I think they're either not just extraterrestrial, but extra dimensional, and or they could be time travelers. I mean, let me ask you this. If I said to you and came to you and said, Gary, I've got a DeLorean, I've got a time travel vehicle here. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go back and check out the invasion of Normandy, or do you want to go watch Jesus on the cross, make sure it all happened the way we're told, or do you want to go to the Roman Empire? I mean, any of the major points in history is what I'm saying. Any of the major points. Do you want to go check it out? What were you going to say to me?
I guess number one's always going to be the crucifixion, isn't it?
No, but what I mean is, if I said to you, let's go, this is what we can do, and I've got the technology, are you going to say, no, I'm not going, or are you going to say, hell yeah, I'm going?
I think there'll be a lot of questions beforehand. I mean...
Okay, assuming I've got a time machine and you know it's really safe, right?
100% safe, so you're not going to blow the timeline out of...
No. We're just going to observe, right? If I say to you, we've got a machine, right? We've got a machine. I've got a vehicle here. We can just go and observe. We won't be seen. We won't be identified. And even if we are, they won't even know what we are. But we can go there and we can check it out, and we can see what this place looked like at this time. We can go see key moments in history. You know, do you want to go check it out? Are you going to go?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I'm going to go too. And any one of us would. That we would go. So what's to say that if you got some sort of future human, say, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 years from now, who've got the technology to come back and have a look at key moments or our history, or they're anthropologists themselves and wanted to see how us ancient humans got on with emerging technologies, you know, don't you think they would if they were that interested? Yeah. I think they would. I think absolutely they would. Then we'd go back and change the timeline.
Man, this conversation is going to go on forever, but we are out of time. But before we go, there is one thing that I want to actually add to this particular location and some of these things that were happening now. And this was from a completely different part of the sky. We were in the same location on a different night. And we were looking more towards the northeast, and we saw this triangular object, or three lights in a triangular formation, and they were slowly heading across the sky. You could see it heading towards us, but as it got closer, it actually started to spread out until it became three individual objects all flying over, and each one was two different colors. There was two different colors emanating from each one of these objects. So one was like a red and a purple color, one was a green and a bluey color, and then the third one was like a white with like an orangey tinge to it. And they went in three completely different directions, but then two of them sort of came back straight out, you know, almost did a stop and then came back in the sky. We were watching them. So no man-made object can do that. I suppose you could say maybe...
I'll tell you something interesting, because I do a lot of reading. There is, in the last couple of years, there's a new fighter jet on the drawing board. And
yes. Yeah.
Do you know what this new fighter jet can do?
Yes, I've seen some of the things for it. Yeah.
Well, depending if we're talking about the same one, but this one can actually transform its shape in midair.
Oh no, I haven't seen that one.
No. So it can go from flight mode, and then they can go into low profile attack mode. And it's another type of stealth fighter. But what you see is you actually see that the body can actually change in midair, the body shape, rather than being one solid thing, it can actually split up. And we're now talking about F-35s, the new upgraded version of the F-35s that can control 5 drones. So one pilot flying the F-35 can also control 5 drones, or the computer on board can control 5 drones. So we're starting to move very primitively into that technology you're talking about, of one object splitting into 3.
Well, let me just finish this story, right?
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you.
No.
Sorry.
No, I know where you're going. It's awesome, but what's interesting is 2 of them came back, and one of them actually stopped almost directly above us, and it was creating this blinking pattern with its light. So I had a high-powered lead lenser torch, and what I did was I matched, if it was like 3 blinks, I matched the speed and the blinks. And then this thing responded.
How did it respond?
By flashing again. And then I started controlling it when I say controlling it, I started going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it responded with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow.
And then I go one long one, and it went 1 long one. And it went like that for probably 3 or 4 minutes before it probably got bored with this blinking light game, and then it took off in a southeasterly direction.
See, that's the thing. That's like a close encounter, like from the movie. That's like a close encounter scenario.
We were gobsmacked. We were absolutely gobsmacked. We didn't have cameras with us that night because it was just, we were going out and we weren't really setting ourselves up. And that's the one that really got me going, we're going to have to start taking a lot of gear to these Skywatch nights and really start to document some of this stuff. And that's when I had the conversation with you, and I decided we're going to have to get myself that spectrum analyzer.
Yeah.
And see if we can't pick up one of these strange signals if we do capture one of them doing the same sort of thing again. Because if we can pick up a certain signal over a strange frequency, that'll definitely be something that we can note down.
Yeah, well, definitely. And that's what I said to you when you were doing this experiment. We were talking about getting the spectrum analyzer. I want to believe that what they're doing at Skinwalker Ranch is really genuine, because because if it is, it's super, super exciting, right? But that's when we got talking about the idea, because you've got a lot more cool gear than I do, you WA millionaires. And but if you and your team over there in WA in a hotspot can get the same results as what Skinwalker is getting, or even similar, and even on the other show Beyond Skinwalker, because they reckon they're getting the same results as what they're on the ranch. If it's fair, if it's genuine, you should be able to get the same results too.
And that validates everything then, doesn't it?
It does. And then it lets us know that I don't think we're still any closer to solving it, but we do know that it's a commonality, it's a common theme. And then if enough people can identify those frequencies and those sounds and those activities, then we're a little bit closer to knowing what these things are.
Yes. I'm actually losing my ability to speak at the moment because it is very exciting. Yes, it does. It's really exciting to be part of something like this, and getting out there and experimenting with these kind of different experiments, I guess. Because
I'm just looking forward to the day that I can get out and say, "Told you."
Yeah. But you and me both know that you can say that all you want, and there's still going to be a spin put on it, and the only thing we can get is that we know.
Oh no, I'd just be happy with this with the negative so-sayers on social media. We can just sit there and say, "Told you," and every UFO researcher and enthusiast and cryptozoologist, and when we finally get validation of our theories and work, so we can sit there and say, "Told you so." That's it. Move on. Nothing to see here. I can't wait
for that.
Well, I got a feeling though, we're going to get our answers on the whole UAP thing, because I think we're a similar sort of age. I think we're going to get those answers within our lifetime. I just hope they're good answers.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
I just hope they're good answers.
Well, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. And in all honesty, with everything going on in the world at this particular moment, now's the time that these entities out there should be coming in, knocking us on the head and turn around and say, you guys need to sort yourselves out because this is ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. And I still believe that if there are any extraterrestrials that are part of our actual universe and that they are enlightened and possess advanced technology to get here, then if there were any person worth their salt, they're not going to have, realistically, they don't want anything to do with us. You know,
No.
not really. They'll watch us, but they should really have nothing to do with us because they think these guys are trouble. They're loose cannons. They're not good custodians of their planet. They just bicker and scream and argue about ridiculous things like petrol and where the dotted line on a map is, or over what god you worship. No. They know there's bigger fish to fry out in the cosmos. They've got bigger concerns, bigger concerns. And here we are scrapping like two seagulls over a chip.
Yeah, we're very primitive. You know, I actually had this conversation with somebody the other day about everything that's going on in the world at the moment, you know, the anti-Semitism and all these other different things. And we had this conversation about, you know, since the days of World War II and everything that happened then, have we really come any further? Because it doesn't appear, while in technological terms, we have made leaps and bounds, and a lot of people, a lot of the population have definitely gone to the next step, but then in the next breath, you see all this stuff going on, and it's like we haven't really got much further down the track as the united planetary group of people.
Well, no, look, and you know you can go back as far as ancient Egypt. I mean, or even pre-biblical days. We haven't changed our behavior. We're inherently violent. I mean, you know, I explained this to one of my children once when she was a teenager. She said, why doesn't you aliens, you know, the good aliens come and visit us and help us out? And I said, well, honey, I said, you know, if you were driving through the city and there was one area that was nothing but trouble, you're going to get your stuff thrown at your car. You could even get attacked. Are you going to drive through that area? Well, no, of course I'm not. No, hell no. I'm not going through there, Dad. I said, well, that's probably the same reason why they don't come here. You may watch it from afar, but you're not going to go in there and get involved because.
And if you do, you lock your doors and wind your windows up, and you don't say boo to all the locals.
That's right. So you come and observe, you come and watch, you come and look. Any of those ones who are going to get involved with us are going to have to be worse than us.
Definitely.
Because as the old saying goes, only about, you know, to control, you know, there's a saying in law enforcement I read once saying that, you know, to control criminals, you've got to be a bigger crim. And
oh, we're getting into a whole different conversation
no,
now.
but the point is if we are inherently violent and paranoid, then whoever's going to keep us in check is going to be worse. Absolutely.
And on that joyous little note, I think we are out of time for this first and fantastic show. So,
well, thank you
Ray,
for having me. I'm feeling very honoured, as I said, honoured to be first cab off the rank, so to speak.
Well, we've touched on so many topics tonight. I would love to have you back on again soon, and we will just continue the conversation and see where it takes us.
100%. No problem. Thank you, Gary.
So there you go. What do you think about Ray? I think he's one of the most genuine people you will ever find in the strange and the mysterious world of the supernatural. If you enjoyed tonight's show, there will be many more to come, and we will be having many, many more guests on and a lot of different topics to be covered. So if you want to hear more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all of those podcast sites where you can find all the best podcasts. Hopefully we will be there with them somewhere. If not, let me know in the comments and I will make sure we are put right where you want to find us. Until then, keep looking up, people, and enjoy the static.